Joel, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Having followed your work for some time, I'm really intrigued to see where this conversation goes today.
Yeah, me too, Mark. Yeah, it's a delight to be with you. Can't wait.
So, as you are aware, we jump straight in with, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's like right to the heart. I might steal this question, and because I also have a podcast, um, because it's such a good one. I mean, there are many questions I think I've been living, but I think at the core of it is an inquiry into what does it mean um, to deepen, to mature, to awaken into my humanity, my divine humanity in this lifetime, and to give my gifts fully, to play my music, um, to be of service in the world. Yeah, I think all the if I look at all the different projects I've taken on, or the different retreats or books, it's like underneath it all, I think, is this sense of deep hunger and curiosity about what it is to be this like this miraculous mystery of being human. Yeah.
And this expression I think is gorgeous, to awaken to my humanity. Can you give us a sense of when that kind of expression started to come to mind?
I certainly remember when I entered my teens. I think where I grew up, uh, on the hillsides in winter, in autumn, they would grow magic mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms, and so a rite of passage was always, when you turned like 16, the older boys would take you out on the moors, and they would show you which ones were psychedelic. And so I think it was already always in me, but I think that helped. We'd started to take mushrooms, and there was just a sense of deep questioning about who am I that came online. I remember it. Who am I? What is this life? What I think in my early years it was, what does it mean to be happy? And as I moved into my 20s, then I became very interested in spirituality and truth and awakening. And that stayed with me. And I think what I realized recently was, in some ways, my attempts to awaken were actually a way of escaping the intensity of being human, of being alive. So I actually was bypassing my experience through meditation, through spiritual practice, and so more recently, over the last years, it's been a descent down for me into my embodiment, and it's still a question of, or it's still an orientation to awakening and to maturing, but it's really about in my body and being fully human and intimate with life, intimacy.
This sounds very familiar, the idea of spirituality as a way of escaping the human predicament. Um, just curious from your perspective, what started to invite you into your body?
Well, one thing was some great mentors that I've had. So, John Prendergast being one of them. I remember sitting with him, and he's great because a lot of the time we would just sit in silence together, and there would be a kind of shared understanding and transmission taking place through being with him. And and his approach to spirituality is very embodied. But what happened in those sessions, and in one I remember particularly, was just this, this center in my belly opening up, um, this kind of sense of deep well-being, peace, and that was just really delicious, and it kind of stayed with me for the um, ongoing days after that quite intensely. And actually, to this day, I think I feel this sense of well-being can really reside in my body and open up in different places. So, I think there's a natural phase if you're oriented to spiritual practices of some people describe like waking up, and then afterwards it's like more waking down into your body. There's a natural kind of sequence. And I think the other thing was it was kind of painful. What I started to notice was it's fine doing meditative practice, but then if you go into your daily life and immediately start to feel stressed and reactive, in relationship to my family or to experience, then I was questioning what's going on there, and I think that led me into more therapeutic work, trauma informed work, which was really about revivifying my body and intimacy with my body, noticing where I was shaping in relationship to the world, to kind of contracting and numbing in response to the intensity of life, and how trauma informed work has helped me to, and it's an ongoing journey, it's certainly not finished, to rest more and more here now simply, and to be intimate with life, yeah, to really taste life. So all these words even are very embodied for me.
Can you tell me what it was like to have an experience of that wellness in your stomach, like it to really come into contact with that?
I can, yeah. So, like, let me share this, that what actually happened was, I think it was around 2021. Um, I started to notice, I had a young child, the pandemic had hit, I was doing spiritual practice and, a number of things. And my anxiety levels started to increase. And then one morning I went outside and something kind of ripped at the top of my head, like physically it felt like it was strange, a very strange sensation. And then and then I just felt this kind of fear descend. And I'm sharing that because then for the next 3 or 4 months, I kind of went through a dark night of the soul type experience, very nihilistic, deconstructed burnout. It was all in the mix. It was very challenging. And um, what happened was, as that subsided, this is when this well-being started to come in. So you can imagine, for me, it was quite an amazing, quite an amazing gift at the end of that journey, because it was quite harrowing at points. And so this, I mean, I remember when it first came in, and it was kind of extraordinary because I'd felt good at times in my life, but this was like a very visceral, embodied sense of like well-being. I even called it the yum. To people I knew, it's like the yum, because it felt so yummy. It sounds like a strange thing to say, but it was like such a yummy feeling. And I would, at one point it was quite pronounced. So I would go and sit, outside in a park, and I would just be completely content and just feeling this sense of well-being. And it would shift. It was in my belly, it was in my heart at one point, it was in my perineum at one point. And I think it was centers opening up in my body, and it did subside. And what I've noticed since then is it vacillates. So there's times where it really comes back online, and it's beautiful. And then there's times where it goes away, and maybe more of the grind type feeling can come back in sometimes. It's usually an invitation for me deeper into, some more work with myself. Like, mostly it's about just really embracing and loving what's here. So yeah, um, you know, I really smile thinking back to that time in my life. And at one point I was like, this is it. I was like, this is it. Because when it first kicked in, it was quite pronounced, and it lasted for maybe like a week and a half. So I was like, waking up every day feeling. I was like, I've made it. I've made it. But of course, everything is always changing and integrating, and think and and then you come in contact with other more challenging material. So I've realized since then not to get attached to it, as well.
Can you talk to me just a little bit about that capacity? And I love when it comes from a direct experience of something, but just what that experience taught you about not totally attaching or clinging to something as this is it, even though there was an experience where it was clearly felt this is it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a painful. It's like it's still something I'm working with. I think it's so innate as human beings to to orient, to attach to pleasurable experience, to pleasurable states, and to want to avoid painful experiences. So um, I think it was a kind of painful lesson, continues to be at points, but I think there's a sense of well-being which is actually inside of the loosening of attachment to needing to be a certain way. So what I should say is, like, these days often it's like, even if the sense of well-being isn't foreground, if I pause and sit for a moment, it's often I can kind of tap back into it. So that confidence in it has grown, and a recognition of the simultaneity that it can be there even when I feel sometimes angry or even afraid, So which sounds kind of paradoxical or contradictory, but that's my growing confidence in it. And I think, of course, the wisdom traditions talk about how our attachment to certain things is actually a cause of suffering. And of course, there's a great wisdom in that. And I think there's something about just even first of all, enjoying something, so it's not like you don't want to renounce it because, like, oh, I might get attached to it. So so I'm just a lot more relaxed with it these days. It's like, just, well, enjoy it. Great, it's here. Really enjoy it. And actually, who cares in a way if I get attached to it? Because I don't want to get attached to not being attached either. So yeah, there's just a lot more relaxation around it all.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued as to that relaxation because and I don't know, your experience is different from mine, but I just mean in the sense of an awareness that something is enough is some way in which I'd have some sort of experience where that seems to be that permeates something in my life at this point in time. And as you say, all the other things can fluctuate on top of that. But there's something about coming into contact with what you're talking about that I think it does create such a greater ease in terms of all the other things that we could encounter in a day, even if it's like a total euphoria. There's something about the way you're describing this that feels like it's I don't know, maybe even a contact with your sense of being or something like that.
Mm, yeah, I think it is. And For me, what's meaningful about it as well is that I used to, earlier in my kind of spiritual life, be more interested in like really expanded, exalted states, and that they're fine, but actually, what I really care about is feeling good. I mean, again, it's not like I need to feel good all the time, and if anything comes in that makes me, I've got to guard against that. But no, just to feel at home inside of myself, to feel okay, this sense of okayness, to feel safe, to feel intimate with life. Actually, those are the things that I really enjoy. And this is, I think, where it's like to be kind of simply human as well, not to necessarily chase something exalted and special.
When you said the word safe there, I almost felt just like a flutter of emotion, and safe, okay, and enough. If you had told me when I started meditating or whatever it would be that those might be the words that would be the end of a path or something like that. I'm not suggesting that's where it is, but that would have all sounded almost quite uninspiring. But as you said them, I just felt this sense of total fortification, or a capacity to meet the world, and even just your use of the word intimate as well. Just curious as to what those words mean to you, or how you feel about even those being some of the words you're landing on.
Yeah, I think it's this is where the trauma informed work I did has been so helpful because again, I like I noticed for a long time in my life there was this kind of, and it was often maybe in the background, quite far in the background, but it was almost like a kind of like the often used analogy of like the water you swim in. So you kind of so acclimated to it that you don't notice it all the time. But it was this background feeling of like dread, like or something could go wrong. Um, it's not safe, it's not safe. And I'm not saying everybody feels like this, it's just something I had. And so to actually be honest enough, because I think I also started to develop a spiritual ego, which is like, well, I've done 10 years of meditation, so it's not easy for me to admit that I feel dread, because it doesn't fit with that identity. So but to actually start to like turn towards that sense of dread and allow it in and to work with that, and then for it to pass, for it to it in fact, it's like the strange, and it's often the way, and I don't know how you find this in your journey, but sometimes I even it's like I forget about the symptom. It's like, oh yeah, that I used to feel like that, but it's just not there anymore. And so safety, and again, this is not like, I'm not talking about strategically controlling my life so that everything is perfect and I'm never going to be threatened. That I'm talking about more of a sense of just feeling at home in one's body and feeling grounded. And it's still an edge for me. It's still the edge for me is around trusting life. So that background dread feeling is gone, and I'm saying I still work with this stuff as well. And intimacy, particularly for me, I think I'm just oriented to um, this sense of aliveness. This is another word that's very important to me. Like, what is it to be? In fact, I'm surprised it's taken me this far into the conversation to say this, but the question actually that's lived my life is, what is it to be fully alive? That's really in a simple sense. So yeah, what is it to fully be alive and intimate, to just feel the touch of the sun on one's skin? And that's why I love this transition from winter to spring, because it's so pronounced, isn't it? That kind of like first spring day. It's like, and it makes me emotional now. It's like, Wow. So so yeah. So intimacy, beautiful. And through one mentor, this word even intoxication became important to me, which sounds strange because I think it has a traditionally a negative connotation of like, you're drunk or something, or like, but it's for me, it's really about what is it to be so intimate and attuned and enjoying the experience of something fully, that you're intoxified by it. There's something extraordinary about it. So
It's
intoxication.
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that word because I wrote something this morning about just taking midday naps with my toddler and lying in between her and my dog, and it was just a very plain scene of just watching their diaphragms, but feeling like a sense of it was all very like intoxifying, if you know what I mean. And it's I don't know. There's something about the way you're describing things here that seems to give such a sense of aliveness to just life itself, like a liveliness that one can be in contact with or notice. Just really intrigued from your perspective, how would you even describe, I don't want this to be too abstract, but just your relationship with intimacy?
I mean, you just gave a great example. The sort of simple beauty of seeing your child's diaphragm or your animal. I mean, and they're so relaxed, aren't they? Children like that. It's I can feel it already because I have a youngish child myself. I know that experience. Um, so so in one sense, it's like a how do you describe intimacy? Because it in one sense it's like we all know it. It's like kind of obvious. There is like, oh, I feel like an intimacy other times and I feel less at others. And um, I think I think intimacy for me has been aided by meditation, by presence practices, because often intimate moments are not when I'm kind of caught in my thinking about how things are, but more with the direct experience itself, with the kind of display um, of this, what does something sound like or look like in its kind of pure form. So I think that's where meditation has helped. And um, I think the other thing that's helped is this journey with trauma integration, with somatic work, with embodiment, has allowed me to kind of sensitize my faculties, my body. I feel more at home. I feel, that it's easier to feel pleasure, to feel joy, to be touched by something. So um, there's a kind of more of an innocence and an appreciation, and I think you can cultivate that too. I remember, and I'm going to forget the gentleman's name, but he's an author who writes about ensoulment, and I think ensoulment is an important part of this, um, of intimacy. But he was saying, what about if you walk around, and I've done this, it's a really amazing, you can do it in your own house as well. It's like you walk around a place as if you're a tourist there, as if you're seeing it for the first time, and you actually strip back the habituated layers of like the layers of habituation, that I know this place, because that's what happens, isn't it? We and I think there's probably a benefit to it biologically, that it allows us to then free up our cognition, to our perception, to kind of take in more, but it dulls us down. So what is it? Just walk around in your neighborhood as if you're there for the first time, and you can feel those filters drop away, and you can do it in your own house. And sometimes it's a bit strange because, like, I remember I'd sit there and I'd be like, just you just recognize, like, oh, first of all, there's like, oh, this is my room and I know it. But if you allow that to drop, it's like, huh, like, what is this? What is this? So, and then there's kind of more of a, I think, a sense of astonishment or wonder that comes in. And I found myself oriented in my life, especially in the last decade, more to spiritual traditions which are not renunciate, that are life affirming. I think there are many spiritual traditions which have a kind of renunciate flavor of like our emotions and our embodiment are the, and the world is an impediment or an illusion even, and I don't, um, would I tell my daughter like the world is an illusion? It's like, no, I stole that line, but I want to give, I've got to give a name check, and I've forgotten his name, but he said it, and I thought it was so good. I will. I don't know if you have show notes. If it doesn't come to me as name, we can
Sure.
put it in the show notes because there are more spiritual teachers now arriving on the scene who are coming from a life affirming um, recognition of our humanity as well. That yes, we are intimately interwoven with life, but we are individuals too. I feel like I'm
You know,
taking us in lots of directions here.
yeah, but I was just thinking there, what an interesting kind of test as to what my beliefs are in an embodied sense, if I'd be willing to tell my daughter it or not. You know, as almost like as a principle for her to adopt to life. It's almost like a potentially a bullshit barometer, if you know what I mean. If I wouldn't share it with her, then is it really something that I have a stake in, or that I truly hold?
That's a great
Um,
point.
God knows she'll be filled with lots of different ideas by me anyway. So I can watch this space, but just this sense though of, you know, even just the idea of feeling pleasure, and maybe, moving away from more renunciate ideas of spirituality. I'm really intrigued for you as to what started to cause that kind of movement, or were there grumblings or thoughts, or how did that kind of begin to move?
I think that dark night of the soul experience I had was quite formative because one of the inquiries which disturbed me a lot was I was, trying to wrap my head around Buddhist notions of emptiness, shunyata, and um, so, and it's a tricky topic and a very nuanced and um, expansive topic, but I think the I just started to, and I'm just thinking now. There was even a moment like a long time ago, 15 years ago, when I did a retreat, and it was a very powerful practice and retreat based awake on awareness. Opening into awareness, awake awareness, and at the end of it, something in me said, "This is not it." And that voice came from deep inside of me and unbidden. It wasn't like I was just thinking about the retreat and trying to work it out. It was like it just came through in a moment of silence. And it wasn't to say like that the whole retreat and the practice is wrong, but it I think the voice meant this is incomplete. And so there was always something in me that said like, no, being human, being an individual is a beautiful thing, and the world is not an illusion. And our emotions and desires surely aren't an impediment to our awakening. Now, I do want to say that, of course, there is a truth to, if we're caught only in a kind of more visceral survival based instincts, around, maintaining a sense of control and safety and having, of course, like that I think that's a superficial It's not That's not the level of well-being and pleasure I'm talking about. Like, that's not to say that, enjoying material objects can't bring pleasure, but I think it's like, yeah. So that all being said, I just I think there are several points from my journey where, through grace, in a sense, I just started to find the right teachers, the right lineages that said, like, no, there are different approaches here. And, no, even there are forms of Buddhism that don't start with, like, this tenet of, like, life is suffering, which I think a lot of Buddhist lineages come from. There are different lineages which start from different places. So yeah, I feel very lucky.
It brought a smile to my face there when you said the word grace with the way that you said it. Can you talk to me a little bit about the role of grace and how you see this unfolding?
You've hit a sweet spot for me, really. I think it's ultimately, so in a sense, like, there's only so far we can go with our own efforts. And who's to say it's not all grace? But I do think there's a moment in our journey where, it's like, hey, I can't do this without you. And so actually prayer has become important to me, very important. And the a pivotal moment for me was recognizing, and this is a big inquiry, recognizing that I'm still trying to do it all myself. And actually, in Buddhism, I think that's one of the key beautiful things about it, is like, it's like they're kind of saying, the means to your own liberation is in your own hands. And that's beautiful. But then, the mystical Christians or other lineages are saying, like, well, um, there's all this help available. Like, life is benevolent. And so for me, it was a very rich transition to start to open into a place where I could say, Lord, I'm not Christian, but to say, like, Lord, I pray that, that your grace lives in my heart. I pray, thank you for everything I have in my life, and um, with your grace, may I be of service in these times to the world. And there's a sweetness and a relief for me in opening to that. And for me, prayer is not, can you give me something? There's something missing now, and give me, please. Although that can be its function, but it's actually the act itself which is the gift of prayer. It's almost like, it's like the gift of prayer is in doing the prayer. It's like an attunement to the grace of life, whatever word feels. I still, my parents both left their Christian backgrounds because they felt hurt by some of the experiences they had there. So I kind of still am um, coming to terms, in a sense, with prayer as well. In a sense, there's even a vulnerability about sharing it with you now. I notice, it's not something I really tell people very much, because, yeah, because of our very secular societies these days.
So much of what you were sharing not only resonates, but it was giving me goosebumps in ways. Your idea of what prayer is and the function of it and what the point of it is, almost, I think is absolutely gorgeous. And there's something to it. I host these things called silent conversations, and I remember, well, someone was, so there's silence and then there's talking, and then so when someone was agonizing about their own patterns and why it took somebody else to point it out to them and how that created even more grief, somebody just kind of said, maybe the point is that we need each other. And when you said that there, just about in your process of, I can't do this without you, and almost looking skywards, I just think there's a beautiful moment of connection there, like that to me feels like the point. And I get what you're saying as well in terms of, look, there's many different traditions, they can have different perspectives, but that definitely feels like something that is, it's not a weakness on my behalf. It's actually just, it's an expansion of my connection or something to that extent.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. I think it's really beautiful. Um, Thank you for reflecting that back. Really appreciate it, Mark. Touches me. And I think like the struggle I've had is, and it's been a worthy struggle, you know. So you talk about questions that we've lived our life around. Like, so more recently, because I kind of grew up spiritually in a Buddhist background, primarily Tibetan Buddhism, and um, the but they don't like anything which like speaks of like eternalism, you know. So God, any notion of some kind of God somewhere is they're very you know, they don't agree with that basically, and I think there's good reasons for that. But then so then I had to sit with like, well, my heart, my heart is just so devoted, you know. It feels this devotion, and like it's so juicy, and it's such a relief after. And I still meditate, and I love meditation, but it's like, you know, there's a juiciness to devotional practice and to prayer that's just so sweet and enjoyable. So then I was like, well, what what is God? You know, like, and I,
just that
you
little
know,
question.
yeah, and of course that's a big trap to fall into, to try and like conceptually reify what God is. But I do think having a view and you know, inquiring into one's view does is powerful, because it reveals the scope of our practice and the orients to our practice. And so I was quite I was quite struggling with that question for some time, and then I started to find speakers and authors that really really articulated in a sense like a non-dual view of God, which I found very helpful. So these questions, which for me, you know, often can bring anguish, you know, like what is it to be fully alive? Because the truth is, you know, sometimes I don't feel like that. I feel kind of dead, you know. So these questions are the way through life. You know, they are the portal. They can often feel sometimes like they're in the way. You know, like, oh, if I only felt more alive, like, but it, but by living these questions, they're very alchemical. You know, they're not just conceptual, are they? That's why I think it's beautiful that you orient your podcast in this way. And so this question for me about what is God was annoying actually at points, you know, but it's like something in my soul couldn't let it go. I was like, I'm not satisfied, and I want to sit with this and contemplate it. And now I start to feel like I'm reaping some of the fruits of that.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that inquiry into God and perhaps the implications that has for your sense of intimacy with this life?
you, yeah, you don't ask the simple you go for the simple
It's a,
question.
it's a problem I have, Joe.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's a stunning question. I want to just say that. So it's really speaking for myself now. You know, really speaking for myself here. The the perfume of grace that's there at times is um, it's this sweetness, and it is a kind of intimacy with life. It is a deep appreciation of life and the sacredness of life and how it shows up in everything. So, um, yeah, I'm careful here. I think what I'm trying not to do is get like, abstract, to be abstracted and um, conceptual. I just want to speak very simply in a way. I think that's the beauty of your question. It's like, what's actually true for me? And I think it's the God or not God, but there's this sense of sweetness and grace which lives in my heart. And I think that's important here because my heart feels like it has a particular intimacy with life that's different than my head, So, and it's really a sense of lovingness. So, like lovingness as a verb, and people like Raymond Paniker, um, who I've benefited from reading from, who is a kind of Christian mystic, multi faith advocate, beautiful writer and man who's not no longer with us, but he actually speaks of God in this way, which I found very helpful. That it's like it's something that's moving, that you can't reify it. It's in a sense you can't grasp it, but it's moving through life itself, and that spoke to me, and that's kind of, I guess, and now I am doing what I tried not to do, which is kind of getting more conceptual. But so I think it's just in those moments of like of the flow of life. That sounds so cheesy, but it's like watching your young child's diaphragm. I mean, that is so poetic what you shared. That is it, isn't it? That is it. That is
Yeah.
that is the divine encapsulated in this. Every parent who's listening to this will just instantly recognize the profound beauty of seeing your child asleep and seeing their diaphragm. I mean, it makes me emotional thinking about it. It's such a So I think that's it.
I never expected to hear the words "the perfume of my of grace," and it kind of moved me as it did. Do you know? I think there's something really beautiful about this. And look, it's a question about God, so it's hard to not go into abstractions in some way. But I really get the sense that there's something quite. It's almost like a way of seeing the world or perceiving the world, and it doesn't feel like another. It doesn't feel like a layer of distortion. It's kind of funny how it's reduced to both the ideas we have of it. It's reduced to such what could be perceived as mundanity, and I think there's something about that, like the essence of it gives off life. Like, even earlier when you were suggesting words like that are attached to well-being are around the words like safe, okay, and enough. Um, to me, it's kind of remarkable how much how much it comes back to simplicity in ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like, um, in a sense, like the inquiry about God, is irrelevant unless it's like practical, you know, and it's about like living life more fully and with more compassion and wisdom. So and with simplicity and serving life. So yeah, and it's funny how even talking about it, I can feel my I can feel a sense of sweetness and grace kind of come in, you know. So it's it's not something that's that far away or abstract. It's palpable, and I I think for people, well, for me, it's like in these times where there is a lot of uncertainty and a sense of doom sometimes when I go and look at the news, it's a real antidote. And I think somebody once said that joy is a moral imperative in these times, and I think that's really wise. And yeah, so I feel in my life personally, grace, love feels similar. Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, and maybe this will help me with my own responses to what I'm experiencing, but can you talk to me a little bit about the inquiry still of how do we feel fully alive, even in the context of the world that we may be looking out at?
Well, first of all, I think the recognition I had is like what what's happening in the world right now is an invitation into our embodiment, intimacy with life, aliveness. So that's the gift, I think, in what's unfolding in the world. Even though it's disturbing and scary at times and devastating when you see some of the things that's happening around the world. So I can't, again, I can't speak for people who live in countries where there is war and stuff like that now. I'm speaking from my own experience as somebody who's seeing these things and living my life with a family and with these crises we face. But it feels it feels all like a deeper invitation into our aliveness. Like I was on a call once with Joanna Macy, who is no longer with us, sadly. She recently passed. She was like pushing 100, and she's a kind of eco philosopher, spiritual teacher. She is incredible. There was a very intimate call, and she, first of all, she was so alive. She was like at that point when I was on the call with her, I think she was 90 or something, or 92, and she was like radiantly alive and vivified. And I can't remember if it was me or someone else asked her like, like, what should we do in these times, And she looked at us and she said, "It's time to celebrate. Like, it's time to party." And but the thing that touched me the most was the transmission of her expression of that in that moment. Yes, when things get difficult and challenging, it's even greater invitation into our aliveness. So, and I think that the gift of AI is it's having us question deeply what it means to be human. If AI is going to take on um, many things that are one of the hemispheres of our brain does extreme, it's going to do it better than us. So it's inviting us into an integration and into, I think, embracing certain capacities of being human, our capacity to feel, to sense, to love, to create, to be inspired, to collaborate. And I think that is a journey of aliveness and intimacy. So I think a lot of these things we're experiencing in the world, like Thomas Hubel speaks about, the kind of collective trauma field that we don't even know we're swimming in, and the ancestral trauma that moves through this, again, that journey for me is a journey of increasing aliveness as we embrace the contraction and the numbness, the pain with love. Then and there's a metabolization that is that journey into aliveness. So I think everything right now feels as if it is a kind of beckoning into into greater aliveness.
It's there's just too many things I'm in agreement or in resonance with you here, Joel. But I really do get the sense that I think that it's almost sad how little we trust in love, um, in terms of when we look at the world, and how we don't see it as a we could almost see it as naive. And I'm looking at the world thinking this is just total proof that something different is needed. And if somebody can live from their heart and feel connected to life, this is what we need more of. I'm not trying to oversimplify the world's problems, but I can't see how that isn't part of a healthy response to it as well at the same time. Really curious for you, Joel, given so much of what you've been saying you've been living with, whether it's how do we awaken the rites of passage on the moors when you're growing up, the ideas around what is it to feel fully alive, this beautiful sentiment of an experience of well-being in your stomach, the invitations into your body and notions of intimacy and kind of beautiful explorations of grace as well. Really intrigued to ask you the question, Joel, of what is a good life for you.
Well, I feel a lot of gratitude arising in me when you asked me that question, which is beautiful. Um, I mean, this. I think a lot of what we've talked about for me, what is a good life. So I think each of us has our own unique inquiry around that. I think that's important to say that anything I share is some of it may be applicable, but it's like nothing is a prescription. Your, I think it's amazing this inquiry you have, um, and of course the I'm going to say some cliched things here. I think it's like the things people have been saying throughout time when they've been asked, what is a good life? And the older I get, the more it's about relationships, um, family, love, friendship. Um, and I think that's why aliveness and intimacy have been so important to me, because that's, those things are experienced in relationship. They're not, you can't experience intimacy with something without there being something else to be intimate with. So I think that's kind of there, and I think that's what maybe a lot. I don't know. I'm curious for you actually to see if there's a kind of common answer people give. But I think I would also say a good life is a life where I walk this path of finding, and I mentioned that word soul earlier, but what is mine to give in this lifetime? Not not from a way that we can often hold that, the tyranny of purpose. Like I had this for a while where I was like, what is my life purpose? And it would be like, I've got to find it, as if it was like existing somewhere, you know somewhere
Yeah.
else other than inside of me. And it became heavy and like a burden, the tyranny of purpose. So, but no, like, what there is a thread. If I look through my life, if I looked at the art I made as an artist in the studios in Manchester, and then as a DJ in nightclubs, and then as a coach, there was this thread of like, I love to hold space, to be a container for something that's enlivened to emerge. So this question, I think, for me has been so powerful. It's like, when I'm most alive in my life, what am I serving the emergence of? What am I serving in life? And so this, yeah. So I'm saying like this, like, um, breaking free from many of the inherited ideas we have of what it means to live a full life, to live a good life, and to find like what's the thing I love to do. Like George Washington Carver, he loved these plants that people would bring to him on the slave plantation, and they would come back to life. People would bring him the plants that were dying, and then he invented like 100, 200 different things from peanuts, you know. And he said, like, whatever you love reveals its essence to you. And so this is, I think, for me, it's like what brings you alive, what do you enjoy doing, what are you curious about, and having the space for that, you know. So I notice for me, my level of like a good life will diminish the more that my life is full of doing things that I'm not quite wanting to do, you know. And it's not that life is ever perfect, and you know, we can have it only be doing, you know, we have obligations and responsibilities, but if I'm not questioning that and what I've taken on and why I'm doing certain things, so if my calendar gets too full, and I've got no space to give myself to love something so it reveals its secrets to me, then my sense of being in my good life diminishes a lot. So space. And in my team, you know, I'd really advise that to the team members. It's like, make space for the magic. You know, if you're not making space for the magic, then because that's where we give our gifts.
Well, Joel, all I can say is that this conversation has definitely made me feel very alive. And so for that, I'm very grateful. And thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Maybe people can tell. I don't know if you can tell, but I think you're a fantastic uh, um, podcast host. Just hold a brilliant space, and your questions are to just get right to the core. I'm really learning from you in that. So it's been a real pleasure, Mark.